Hello friends, I am Shelly Clough, and today I don't know if this video is going to be too simple or not, but I thought it might be helpful for some of you to learn how to fill out a swatch card like this. So what I have right here is a brand new palette. This is actually the kind that I fill and sell on my website. If you want one, you've probably seen it in my videos, but this is a brand new palette. And this is a swatch card, so it's printed on watercolor paper, and what it enables you to do is to see a couple things. One, what these colors look like on paper, because they are darker in the pan than they are on the paper, and it also allows you to see the spectrum of color that they create. So I have a swatch card here that I made for one of my larger palettes, and so you can see that I make like a little gradient for each color, and I show the name and brand of the color. That is also useful because as I'm using these paints, if a color runs out, then I know how to refill that color. I can repurchase, I can have a tube of paint and I can just refill that pan. So let's dive in and show you how to fill out a swatch card. So for a brush today, I'm going to grab my size 6 Princeton Neptune brush. It doesn't matter too much what kind of brush you use, but essentially what we're going to do is we're going to be adding a really concentrated amount of color on one side and then washing that color out. So I'm going to give my brush a good rinse. I'm going to come to this color and really swirl my brush on there so that I'm getting a nice concentrated amount of color. So I'm just going to swirl that for a minute, and then I'm going to make a stroke of that color right there. Then I'm going to rinse my brush, and with a clean wet brush, I'm scraping it off so that it's not totally loaded with water, and then I'm going to grab that color and move it to the other side of that swatch card. So this kind of shows me, sometimes after I do that, I will re-wet the concentrated side, and what you want is just sort of that gradient of color. So now we're going to move on. I'm just going to wipe that a little bit so I will have a nice, pretty gradient. Okay, now I'm going to do the second one. So I'm going to dip my brush and again swirl really nicely on this color so I get a really concentrated amount of that color. And then I'm just going to swipe right here. And I'm just being careful because this color is wet. I don't want to touch those two colors because then they will merge and then I'll no longer see what the actual color looks like. And then give my brush a rinse and a scrape, and then take that color and just move it down that swatch. Okay, now we're just going to keep on going. So now this palette that I use, all of these colors are by Winsor & Newton. And the first two colors you see here, Opera Rose and Quinacridone Magenta, they are from the Professional line. So their pigment is a little bit stronger. These other colors, all the other ones, are from the Cotman line, which is they're like college grade paints. And they still work great, but the pigment sometimes takes a little bit more effort to pay off. That's really the only difference, but they're a great starter paint option because they're high quality enough that you can use them for a long time, but they are a lot less expensive than buying a full set of professional grade paints. So now I'm just moving on to alizarin crimson, really just working my brush. I'm gonna get a little bit more water in there. I'm using a fairly minimal amount of water because I want that first stroke of color to be very concentrated. This is like the most intense. I want this to demonstrate the most intense that this color can be. And then on this side, the most subtle that it can be. So I've got my brush and I'm just gonna work that color over. Swatch cards are really kind of a fun activity. It's nice, soothing activity. And it's great for sort of acquainting you with the range of the colors in your palette. One thing you can also do if you are, if you're having a hard time not letting your colors bump into one another, you can paint every other one, and then when you come back around, that first layer will be dry and you won't have to be quite as careful about not letting your colors touch one another. So in this particular palette, the reason I make these at all is because I had looked for a pre-made palette when I was first starting to teach workshops. This is the palette that I use when I teach in-person classes. I have a big stack of them. And I was looking for a pre-made palette that had the colors that I knew I would want to use when I was teaching. And I couldn't find one that had all the colors that I wanted, particularly because a couple of them are these professional grade colors. They just don't make these pigments in the Cotman line. And I really love both of these colors, and I wanted to be able to have them in my classes. And for all of the other colors, so for the primaries, I have a cool and a warm of each color. So 2 reds, 2 yellows, and 2 blues. And then I have a few other colors that I just feel like I love to have handy when I paint. So I have a couple of browns that are so useful for kind of quick mixing. Browns you can mix on your own. They just take a lot of time and effort, and you have to get them just right. So it's really nice to have a pre-mixed brown. And I have kind of a cooler one and a warmer one of those. I also have Payne's Gray, which is an awesome shortcut for deepening a color and using that as an alternative to black. And then I have this yellow ochre color, which I love for, it's actually great for painting a sky. If you mix yellow ochre with some Prussian blue, it adds just a little bit of that yellow ochre, or will sort of make your sky a really realistic blue color. And at some point I learned that, and then I just had to have yellow ochre. And it's also a really nice color for making some sort of muted tones without being as aggressive as a full brown. And then I have another color called Indigo, which is just a favorite of mine. It's a super deep blue, and I love it. And then I also have a pre-mixed purple, this Purple Lake, because it's just a lovely purple, and I wanted to have that because I do so many floral paintings. So that is the why. Oh, and then sorry, these greens. So I have my primary colors in these pre-mixed greens. This sap green here is another one of my favorite pre-mixed colors. You'll find it in a lot of different lines of paint color, sap green, and it's just a lovely leaf green. And then Viridian green is, you'll see that in a lot of pre-made palettes. It's just a really powerful pigment, and so you can do a lot of mixing with it. So that's kind of the why behind how I set up this palette the way that I do. And when I paint with this palette, I never feel like I need any other colors. I feel like I have everything that I want to have. There's that Viridian green. It's such a potent pigment. But because it's so potent, it's really great for mixing with other colors. But by itself, there's not a lot of uses for it because it's just such a saturated color. Okay, so there you have it. A pretty simple video, but I thought there's probably some of you who don't know how to do this, and it might be helpful to see how it is done. This is really handy to create a swatch card like this for the palettes that you have. A lot of pre-made palettes will come with a swatch card that you can fill out. If you are filling your own palette, I will show you how you can do that. Okay, so this is a palette where I just bought these empty ceramic trays. I bought 2 of them, and then I put in a bunch of colors that I love. I call this my professional palette. I'll use it sometimes when I'm just here at my desk at home. And I wanted to make a swatch card for this, so I knew what colors I was going for, and I had kind of a reference for what those colors look like. And so that's what I showed you earlier, this swatch card right here. And all I did to create this was get a big piece of watercolor paper, and then I actually just placed my palette on top of the paper, traced the shape of it, and then made little marks for each well so that I had little separation marks so that it lines up perfectly with the palette that I have. And so I know exactly what color is where. And so I will just sort of set this up on my desk so that I can see it while I'm painting and kind of know what I'm aiming for as I go to mix colors. So that is a way that you can make a swatch card if the palette that you're using doesn't come with something pre-printed like this. So I hope that this was helpful for you. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to check out some of my other videos if you're looking for tutorials instead of just instruction. And we will see you all in the next video. Thanks so much for watching.